I want to ask you something before I tell you this story. Have you ever been in the middle of an ordinary Saturday morning? Coffee made, house quiet, the weekend stretching out in front of you in that particular way that feels like a small gift, and had someone knock at your door who you had not expected and had not prepared yourself for? Not a stranger, not a delivery, someone from your past. Someone whose face you know as well as your own reflection. Someone whose absence from your life has been for years simply the way things are. And in the moment before you open the door, in the half second between seeing them through the glass and reaching for the handle, you understand that whatever comes next is going to cost you something. You do not know yet whether it will be worth paying. But you open the door anyway. My name is Rebecca. I am 41 years old. I live in a small house in Denver, Colorado that I have made into exactly what I need. Not large, not grand, but mine in every sense of the word. I have a job I love, teaching fourth grade at a school 3 blocks away. I have a dog named Oscar, who has opinions about everything. I have a life that I built, piece by piece, from the rubble of something that broke 9 years ago. 9 years ago, my closest friend did something that I did not think I would recover from. I recovered. And then, on a Saturday morning in October, she knocked on my door, and she had come to say sorry. This is the story of what happened when I opened it. Her name is Amy. Amy and I had been friends since we were 19 years old, freshmen at the University of Colorado, both from small towns, both slightly overwhelmed by the scale of a university campus, and the particular freedom and terror combination of being truly on our own for the first time. We had met in the laundry room of our dormitory, both of us having arrived at 11 at night, with 2 weeks of accumulated laundry and the slightly desperate energy of people who have been putting something off for too long. We talked while our clothes washed. We talked while they dried. We walked back to our rooms at midnight, still talking, and agreed to have breakfast the next morning, and that was the beginning of 13 years of friendship that I would have described, without hesitation, as the most significant relationship of my adult life outside of my family. Amy was vivid. That is the word I have always used for her. She had a quality of aliveness, a brightness and energy, and the specific ability to make any situation feel more interesting than it had been before she arrived. She was also deeply loyal, in the years when she was loyal. She was the friend who showed up without being asked, who remembered not just your birthday but the anniversaries of the difficult things, who brought food when you were sick and sat with you when you were sad and made you laugh when you were too far into your own head. I loved her completely. For 13 years. And then, when I was 32 years old, Amy did something that I cannot fully detail here because it involves other people whose privacy matters and whose part in this story is not mine to tell. What I can tell you is this. It was a betrayal of my trust in a way that had direct and lasting consequences for my life. It involved something I had told her in confidence, something vulnerable and specific that I had shared because she was the person I shared everything with, being used in a way that caused me real damage. Not accidentally, with intent, though intent shaped by circumstances that I came to understand better later. The damage was real, the breach was complete, and Amy, in the weeks after I found out, did not apologize. She explained, she justified. She offered context that was real and that I understood and that did not, in any meaningful way, address the fact of what she had done. I ended the friendship, not in anger. I had moved through the anger in the first weeks and arrived somewhere colder and clearer on the other side. I ended it with a short, honest message that said, I understand why you did what you did. I do not believe you intended the outcome. But the trust is gone, and without it I do not know what we are. I think we need to stop. She did not reply, and 9 years passed. 9 years during which I rebuilt the parts of my life that had been disrupted. During which I thought about Amy occasionally, not constantly, not obsessively, but with the particular quality of thinking about something that is unresolved, that has no clean ending. During which I arrived, slowly and imperfectly, at something that felt like acceptance of the fact that the friendship was over and the apology was never coming, and that both of those things were simply true. And then came October. It was a Saturday, 8:30 in the morning. I had been up since 7. Oscar had been insistent about that, and I was on my second cup of coffee with a book I was genuinely absorbed in, and the particular contentment of a morning that had no obligations. The kind of morning where you feel the good fortune of your own ordinary life very clearly. The knock was not loud. 3 times, evenly spaced, the kind of knock that is trying to be considerate rather than urgent. I put the book down. I went to the door. I saw her through the glass before I opened it. 9 years. She looked different, not unrecognizable, not even dramatically changed, but the way all of us look when a decade has passed. Different in the way that is both familiar and not. The same face, carrying more years. I stood at the door for a moment that felt longer than it was, and then I opened it. Rebecca, she said. Not an apology yet. Just my name. the way she had always said it, with the particular warmth that had been hers for 13 years before it wasn't anymore. "Amy," I said. We looked at each other. She said, "I know I should have called first. I couldn't make myself call. I was afraid you wouldn't answer. Or that if you did, you would tell me not to come. And I needed to come. I've needed to come for a long time. I'm sorry for just showing up." I thought about that for a moment. And then I said, "Do you want to come in?" She looked slightly surprised, as if she had prepared herself for a range of responses and this particular one had not been at the top of the list. "Yes," she said, "if that's okay." I stepped back from the door. Oscar appeared from the kitchen to assess the situation. He regarded Amy with the specific intensity of a dog who has not decided yet whether a person is friend or threat, which is its own kind of wisdom. "This is Oscar," I said. Amy looked at him. "Hi, Oscar," she said. He sniffed her hand and then walked back to his bed, which I interpreted as provisional acceptance. We sat down in my living room, and Amy said, "I have been trying to find the right moment to do this for 3 years. I kept telling myself it was too late. And then I kept telling myself that telling myself it was too late was a way of not having to be brave. So I got in the car this morning before I could talk myself out of it." She looked at me. "I am sorry, Rebecca, for what I did, for the damage it caused, for the way I handled it afterward, the explaining instead of the apologizing. For the 9 years of silence, I am sorry for all of it. And I am not here for forgiveness. I am not owed that. I am here because you deserved an apology 9 years ago, and I was too afraid and too proud to give it. And the least I can do, this late, is finally give it." I want to be honest about what happened inside me when she said that. I had imagined this conversation many times over the years. In the early years, the first 2 or 3 after the friendship ended, I had imagined it often. I had rehearsed what I would say. I had felt, in those imaginings, the satisfaction of someone who has finally been given what they were owed, the particular closure of an apology long withheld. By the time Amy actually appeared on my porch, I had largely stopped imagining it. I had made my peace, or what I told myself was peace, with the likelihood that it would never come. And in that process, something had shifted in me about what I needed from it. So when she said it, when the actual apology arrived after 9 years of its absence, what I felt was not the satisfaction I had imagined in the early years. What I felt was more complicated than that. Relief, genuine relief, not for myself, or not only for myself, but for her. Because I could see, sitting across from her in my living room, what carrying 9 years of an undelivered apology had cost her. It was visible in the way she held herself, in the quality of her voice, in the particular care of someone who has been rehearsing a difficult thing for a very long time, and is finally, at considerable personal cost, saying it. I felt something that surprised me. I felt compassion, not the performed kind, the real kind, the kind that arrives when you see another person clearly and recognize, in their difficulty, something human that you also carry. And underneath the compassion, something harder. Anger. Old and muted. Not the sharp anger of the initial betrayal, but the dull, residual anger of someone who has spent 9 years restructuring a life around a damage that did not have to be done. The anger you feel not in the moment of being wronged, but in the long aftermath of it. When you understand fully the ripple effects. Both things were true simultaneously. The compassion and the anger. The relief and the grief. I sat with all of it for a long moment after she finished speaking, and I said, "I hear you, and I believe you." She looked at me with an expression that was trying to be composed and was not quite managing it. I said, "I need to tell you something honestly. The apology, it matters. It matters more than I thought it would now that it is here. But I also need to say that I have been okay. I have built a good life. The damage happened and I dealt with it, and I am not sitting here in pieces. I want you to know that. Not to diminish what you did or what it cost, but because I don't want you to carry the image of me as a person who has been waiting here, broken, for 9 years. She nodded. "I know," she said. "I have watched from a distance, not stalking you, I promise. But I knew you had landed on your feet. I was glad of it, more than I knew how to say." We sat in the quiet for a moment, and then I said, "Do you want tea?" She looked at me, and she said, "Yes, please." We sat in my kitchen an hour, with tea. With Oscar eventually moving his bed closer to Amy's chair in the incremental way of dogs who have made a decision and are pretending they haven't. With the October light coming through the kitchen window and the particular quality of a Saturday morning that had become something entirely other than what it had started as. I want to tell you what we talked about. Not the betrayal itself. We addressed that, carefully and honestly, without reliving it in a way that served no one, but the years. What had happened in each of our lives in the 9 years since. Not in the catching up way of people who have simply lost touch, but in the more careful way of people who understand that they are doing something delicate and that every word has weight. Amy had changed in ways I recognized and ways I did not. She was quieter than I remembered, the vivid brightness still present but softer, less performed. She had been in therapy, she said, for 5 years. Not for what happened between us specifically, but for a larger reckoning with herself that had eventually, in its own time, brought her to my door. She had married a man named Greg, who she described with the specific warmth of someone who has found something they did not know they were looking for. They had a son who was 4, Henry, she said, and the way she said the name told me everything about how much she loved him. She had changed jobs, left the industry she had been in when we were friends, moved into nonprofit work. A cleaner conscience, she said, and then laughed in a way that was self-aware rather than self-deprecating. I told her about my life, about teaching, which I had moved into 4 years after the friendship ended, and which had turned out to be the most exactly right thing I had ever done with my professional life. About Oscar, about the house and the neighborhood and the particular pleasures of a life that was quiet and full simultaneously. I told her about the year after the friendship ended, not to reopen old wounds, but because she had asked, and because the truth of that year was part of the story, and because she deserved to know what her absence, combined with the damage of what she had done, had actually looked like from inside. She listened without defending herself, without reaching for context or explanation. She just listened. And when I finished, she said, "I am sorry for that year. I am sorry for every day of it." Simply, without addendum. I nodded. "I know," I said. We sat for a while after that. And then Amy said something that I want to share with you because I think it is one of the truest things I have heard said about apologies. She said, "I kept thinking that if I waited long enough time would pass, that saying sorry would be easier, that the distance of years would soften it somehow. But it doesn't work like that. The longer you wait, the harder it gets, because the weight of what you owe becomes larger with every year you don't pay it. I should have come 4 years ago, or 8 years ago. The right time was always sooner than I came." I thought about that for a long time after she left. I am still thinking about it. I want to be honest about something. I did not, in that kitchen on that Saturday morning, forgive Amy in the way that forgiveness is described in movies. There was no cathartic moment where the years of hurt dissolved and were replaced by warm light. There was no embrace that contained everything. There was no declaration that everything was going to be okay. What there was instead was something quieter and, I have come to believe, more real. There was the apology, which was genuine and which I received as such. There was the hour of honest conversation, which established, carefully and without pretense, that both of us were different people from the ones who had ended that friendship 9 years ago. There was the tea and the October light and Oscar's incremental decision that Amy was acceptable. And there was the decision I made, quietly and privately, in the hour after she left. I sat on my couch with Oscar on my lap, and I thought about forgiveness and what it actually means. Not the version where forgiving someone means pretending what they did was okay. Not the version where receiving an apology means the debt is cleared and everything returns to what it was. Not the version that is performed for other people's comfort. The real version, which is this. I was carrying something. 9 years of something. Not the acute pain of the original wound that had faded long since, but the particular weight of an unresolved thing. A story with no ending. A door that had been closed but not properly latched. Amy's apology latched the door. Not the same door we had had before. That one was gone, and I did not want to pretend otherwise. But a door. A proper closing. The kind that means the past is in the past in the full sense of the word, rather than in the past but occasionally rattling on the hinges. I forgave Amy that afternoon. Not for her. For me. Not because what she did was acceptable. It wasn't. And forgiving it did not make it so. But because carrying it was costing me something, however small, however manageable. And the apology had given me the thing I needed to put it down. Put it down without condition. Put it down completely. And walk into the rest of my life without it. She texted me that evening. A short message. "Thank you for letting me in. I mean that in every sense." "I hope Oscar has reconsidered me," I replied. "He has. Provisionally." She sent back a single laughing emoji. And that small, ordinary exchange after 9 years of silence, felt, in its undemanding simplicity, like the beginning of something. Not the friendship we had had, something smaller and more honest. Something new. The karma in this story lives in 2 places. The first is Amy's 9 years. She carried what she had done for 9 years. Not painlessly. I know this now, from the hour in my kitchen. She carried it through the building of her new life, through her marriage, through the arrival of her son Henry. She carried it in therapy. She carried it in the particular way of people who have done something they cannot undo and have not yet found the courage to acknowledge it to the person who deserved the acknowledgement. That carrying was the karma. Not dramatic, not public. The quiet, internal accounting of a person who knows the ledger is unbalanced and has not yet found the way to balance it. The second place the karma lives is in what came after she finally came. Amy told me at the end of our hour that something had shifted in her the moment she knocked on my door. Not when I let her in, though that was its own extraordinary gift, but in the act of knocking itself. In the choosing, after 9 years of not choosing, to finally do the thing. She said it felt like something releasing, like setting down a weight she had been carrying so long she had forgotten it was there until it was gone. I understood that completely, because I felt the same thing when I opened the door. Karma, in this story, is not punishment and reward in the simple transactional sense. It is the natural consequence of things done and undone, the weight of an undelivered apology, the relief of finally delivering it, the unexpected grace of a door opened when it did not have to be. Amy and I have coffee once a month now, not the friendship we were. We have both said that clearly, and neither of us is trying to recover something that belongs to the people we were at 19 and 21 and 30. Those people are gone. We are different people. And different people, building something new from the foundation of an old honesty, can do that. Last month, Amy brought Henry. He spent the entire visit trying to convince Oscar to play fetch. Oscar spent the entire visit declining with magnificent dignity. Henry found this the funniest thing he had ever encountered. Watching them, this small, bright 4-year-old laughing at my endlessly patient dog, I thought this is what comes after. Not the wound and not even the healing, just this. 2 people in their lives sitting in the ordinary morning light, building something new from what survived. I want to say 2 things. 1 to the people who are waiting for an apology, and 1 to the people who owe one. To those who are waiting, I know what that waiting is. Not the acute early grief of a fresh wound that has its own particular quality. I mean the long waiting, the years of it. The way an unresolved thing occupies a small but permanent corner of your inner life, not destroying you, not defining you, but present. Always slightly present. The apology may come, or it may not. If it does not come, if the person who owes it never finds the courage to knock on your door, I want you to know that you can still put down the weight. You do not need the apology to forgive. Forgiveness is not a transaction that requires 2 parties to complete. It is something you can do for yourself, alone, at your own pace, without anyone else's participation. Forgiveness does not mean what they did was acceptable. It means you have decided that carrying it is costing you more than releasing it. It means you are choosing yourself over the story. You are allowed to make that choice on any Saturday morning you decide to. You do not need anyone to knock first. And to the people who owe an apology, Amy said something true. The longer you wait, the heavier it becomes. The right time is always sooner than the time you are considering. I know it is frightening. The door might not open. The person on the other side might have moved past the place where your apology can land anywhere useful. That is a real risk. I am not going to pretend it isn't. But the alternative, carrying it for 9 years or 19 or for the rest of your life, is a price that does not decrease with time. It increases. Get in the car. Before you can talk yourself out of it, knock 3 times evenly spaced, and say the thing you should have said a long time ago. This has been Soul Tales. My name is Rebecca. Next Saturday, Amy and Henry are coming over. I have already warned Oscar. He is preparing himself for the fetch negotiations.